And a very big welcome everyone to the return of mobile rolling with a different format because of the whole COVID-19 situation happening around the country. At the moment, restrictions are in place, but we're not going anywhere. We're going to do a bit of a podcast series each week here on our social media platforms and of course our website at mobilerolling.net and of course on YouTube as well, uploading weekly interviews with harness racing participants from across the state, whether they be drivers or trainers or so forth. And we're joined by one of the best drivers in the state today, Mark Billinger. Mark, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lockie, for having me here.
Fantastic to have you on. Now, first off, I'll start the interview by telling us about how you got involved in the sport at first and some of your background about how you went into the sport in your early days.
Yeah, well, family's always had the background. Mum and Dad, they've always been involved, and it was just a progression, I guess. From school, I started doing the pony racing and really enjoyed it, and then just continued on. When I was able, from 16 years, I got my driver's licence. I've been doing a lot of track work before then. And yeah, it's just progression, got my junior driver's licence and went on from there.
So what age did you start with the pony trots?
Ooh, I think around about 9 or 10.
Yep.
Lucky enough, I had some really good ponies, and one actually won the Inter-Dominion when I was about 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah, there's a famous story Jim actually told on the show a couple months back about you winning the pony trot Inter-Dominion. That must have been a big thrill for you. Looking back on your time with the pony trots, what are some of the memories that spike to your mind?
Yeah, just the travelling, getting used to, travelling with a horse. That little pony of ours, we went as far as Tamworth, the championship up there, and then we went to Harold Park, which is lucky we won a race at Harold Park, and of course Moonee Valley, we won the Inter-Dominion.
So would you say your time with the ponies really sparked your interest in becoming a driver on a standardbred level?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's it just gave you that experience of, back then the crowds were enormous, a lot more than what we get like now. So yeah, it just got you used to, and the competitiveness of and getting to know, to train your pony, to feed them. So yeah, it gave me that background.
So as you said, you started getting into the standardbred side of things and progressing to harness racing at the age of 16. Now, how did you go that transitioning from ponies to harness racing? Did you find a big difference? Yeah, of course. The size of the horse's speed, different type of racing, of course. But it was a little bit to adjust, and you just got to start from somewhere, and you just try to talk to a lot of people and learn from their experiences, and gradually you get better and better. So, what year were you being around when you got your concession licence?
I started driving in 1988.
Yep.
And it didn't take me that long. That was late 1988, and early 89 I got my first winner.
So what was the horse, by the way, you got your first win on, do you remember?
It was Countess Nina at the old Victor Harbour track.
Yep. Bit of a backstory behind that. What happened? Where were you sitting during the race? Was it a bit of a leading scenario, or what happened?
Actually, it turned out quite good. It was a standing start race. Back in those days, you had a lot of C1 or betters, standing starts, and we began okay, and we probably won out one back, what I remember, and she sort of only peeled out the top of the straight, and she won.
Awesome. So looking back on your time then in the late 80s and early 90s when you were just starting in the sport, what do you think are some of the main differences from harness racing back then compared to today?
I guess there's a lot more people back then were involved.
Yep.
A lot more different tracks were open.
Yep.
And it was probably more viable, for the expense of feeding a horse to what stake money you went for back in those days. So, yeah, it was a big difference, and that's about the most of it.
Yeah. Of course, your career spans, nearly to the 25, 30-year mark now in harness racing. What are some of the biggest memories that pop up for you over that time with driving or training?
Yeah, I think probably, even though I wasn't that successful, driving into Dominion was a great thrill with Friends for Life up in Queensland. The Mildura Cup was another great one. driving my 1000th winner on a filly that I at the time was training, I bred and owned out of Lardis. That was a great thrill. Yeah, and I drove 5 winners one night, so that, it's just little things like that just pops up. But as every time you go out there, it's just a thrill to win a Monday race, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great you have that sort of attitude where a Monday race can still mean as much as a Saturday night race or a feature race, for instance.
Yeah.
We'll talk about a little bit now about your preparation heading into a drive. What are some of the things you do before you head out onto the track, or some of the study you might do before heading into a race?
Yeah, well, Lockie, I sort of try to just keep it to the day of the race. Say we're racing on a Saturday night, I'll probably 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, I'll photocopy the fields, check the scratchings, and then just look at the barrier draws in the races. I mean, I only really concentrate on the races I'm actually driving in.
Yep.
And then it's just a matter of looking at videos, seeing where the horses were in that position if they have been before, and see if they've gone back, forward, gate speed. It's very important to do your homework. You get left behind as a driver if you don't at least do some homework on them.
Do you ever go back and review your drives?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm my worst critic.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you improve. I'm still improving. I hope that I'll get better.
Yeah.
And I've been in it for 30 years, so it's one of those things that you just keep improving, and every race is completely different.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I found really important as a race caller was having someone to guide you, a mentor. When you first got into the sport, was there anyone really, or multiple people it might be, that were really your mentor and guiding you in the right direction when you first started?
And I looked at a lot of drivers back then, and I was very lucky to have great drivers like, you got Jeffrey Webster back then, you had Ross Sugars, Trevor Kelly, you had the two Justice brothers, Jim Hurley. Influence-wise, a lot of, I've been lucky enough to drive for some really good trainers in Jim Hurley, Graham Johansson at the time, Reg Trevine had a big team at one stage. I was driving for him. And you just learn through little tricks, where you've probably stuffed up and they've said you should have done that a little bit, and you learn, and as you said, it's just time, and you just get better as long as you just keep at it.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose there's probably some days where you're really pleased with your work, and other days you just want to hide away almost, because you have a lot of ups and downs, I'm guessing, and it'll be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, especially when you're first starting as a driver. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what it is. It's about getting out there, trying your best. We're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And then from there, as long as when you do make a mistake, you try not to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing. It only becomes a mistake when you repeat it multiple times. So we'll talk about a lot of situations can happen out there as a driver, and it's almost, you never know really. You can do all the study in the world, but certain situations happen and things can change out there. When you've got a horse that's over-racing, pulling a little bit, what do you like to do in that situation?
Well, it depends where you are in the run. Sometimes if you're locked up on the rail, you can't let the horse out.
Yeah.
So you just got to work with what you've got. Depending on your horse, I sometimes try to get the horse's head right on the driver's helmet, and sometimes that will relax a horse. Sometimes horses, you go back about a metre and back them off a little bit. And, depending on the horse and how they feel, you just got to try these things. Sometimes you just slowly just move the head to one side to the other and get the bit through the mouth. It's just different things you try, and every horse is different.
Now, we see it every week. Sometimes you're driving horses, you drive week in, week out for certain trainers. Other times you might be hopping on a horse for the first time. Now, when you're about to drive a horse for the first time in a race, how do you approach that situation when you don't know a horse exactly? Yeah,
well, that's where you probably do a little bit more homework on them. You have a look, how they've sort of raced in the past. Do they get on the bit? Are they lazy? Have the gate speed? And then, the warm-up's I treat the warm-up as very important.
Yep.
I really like, if I have my choice, I like to give them a fairly solid warm-up and even a little bit of a dash down the straight, and just see the action of the horse and see how they react.
Yep.
and how they walk,
Yep.
and just little things like that.
Something we've seen recently because of the whole COVID-19 situation is drivers return to wearing their actual colours that belong to them as a driver. Your colours are yellow with the blue, of course. Tell us where your colours originate from.
Well, they were my father's originally. Going back in history, I've got a background of working at Holden's as a toolmaker, fitter and turner, and Dad did that same thing years ago and then become an engineer. And the colours are sort of this, with dye work, you can use a yellow ink with a blue thing to actually grind dyes, and I think that's where the colours originally come from.
Yep.
The horseshoes, well, that's to do with horses, and,
Yep.
and that's where it came, I think.
So it must be like you must feel a sense of pride wearing those colours since it comes to you from your father's background. And I know this COVID-19 situation isn't very positive at the moment, but I think one thing for you is you get to go out there wearing your own driver colours. It must feel a sense of pride for you to wear those colours and represent your father's background almost.
Yeah, like I love wearing those colours.
Yeah.
They mean a lot to me. I really believe it's a good idea to keep going forward with the drivers' colours. They've been doing it for years in America.
Yep.
You don't have the issue of two horses with the same trainer in the race where you don't know your colours. It actually gives the driver a bit more of a brand.
Yep.
And also for the punter, I guess, they know the colours of the driver they're backing, so it's easier for them to spot us in a race.
Yep.
And there is benefits for it.
Exactly, and it's changing a lot in that way because I think we saw a bit earlier on, a couple of years in fact, we saw the inclusion of coloured saddlecloths into the sport with the greyhound colours coming in, and I think there is a need from punters to want to spot their horse during a run. So I think something like that, I certainly like it. I like the driver colours out there. Of course, I call the trials, and when we see the driver colours in the trials, I've become very used to that. So as a caller, seeing them out there now during this whole situation, it's been easy for me to transition. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it would be a good inclusion to see driver colours on a more permanent basis. But of course, you'll get the argument from trainers as well. Of course, a lot of stable colours are held closely to a lot of trainers' hearts around the country. So it's an interesting debate there, but it was interesting to get your perspective on that. Another thing I wanted to talk about, your sulky. It obviously is your own, and as a driver, how important is it to have your own sulky out there with you?
Well, I believe your sulky is like your office.
Yep.
You're very comfortable in it, and it's just one thing that you can just take out of the situation is that you feel comfortable in your sulky, you know exactly where your footrests are, your seat, your positioning, and you can just look forward to going forward and concentrating on the race and the horse you're driving.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, it's most of the top probably half a dozen drivers in Adelaide have their own sulky now.
Yeah. If you could give any bit of advice to a young aspiring or a young driver out there, what would it be early on in their career? What would be the most crucial bit of advice you could give to a younger driver?
Knowing that you're going to make mistakes and just keep learning from them, a lot of study, and just keep going. But study is a big thing before you race. Get to know all the horses around you, what they do, the drivers, the different styles, there's different style of drivers out there, and that would help them a lot.
Now, only 4 months ago, you came back from a bit of a lengthy spell. Talk to us about what it was like for you, like coming back from a spell like that and getting back in the car and getting back out there. Did it take you a while to get a feel for it again, or did it just come back naturally?
I was lucky enough, it sort of come back fairly naturally. The feel was there. Probably the speed. I was lucky enough that I was helping, and I still do. Aaron Bain's been great for me, and a few other trainers helped me real early, so I could do a lot of track work, my brother included. And you just got a feel of the speed, and it didn't take me long, and I was back into it.
Talk to us about some of the trainers. Of course, you mentioned Aaron Bain, but some of the trainers who have always been big supporters of you throughout your career or recently over the last couple of months.
Yeah, well, Jonathan Kingston Main was really good for me. He's not really training at the moment. He's actually being a
He's
mobile
getting back into it.
Yeah. But yeah, like Reg Trevine, he's got that nice trotter I drive, Champagne Prince.
Yep.
You know, he's been a good a friend actually, and more than a trainer. But yeah, it's been great. Yeah, there's a lot of trainers that I drive now, which, you know, there's quite a few, so I can't really mention too many other.
Yep.
Yeah. Off the top of my head.
Well, anyway, Mark, it's been very educational. Thank you for your time today here on Mobile Rolling, and thank you for all the insights you have given us. We'd just like to say a big thank you to House of Chow, based here in Adelaide on Hutt Street as well, for providing the location for today's interview. They've been fantastic supporters today, and they've been a great host as well. So a big thank you to House of Chow. Make sure you come and visit them when they're still serving takeaway throughout this COVID-19 crisis. But when the restrictions are eased, of course, make sure you come and visit House of Chow. They prepare some fantastic Chinese food and some fantastic Chinese takeaway, obviously, as well during this time. So a big thank you to House of Chow, and a big thank you for joining us today on Mobile Rolling. We'll be back next week with another harness racing identity here in South Australia.